There is alarm bells being rung across the country by providers, by parents. Every day we're seeing articles in the media about the concerns about this crisis.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. The Liberals love to talk about how they love kids. They love talking about how many kids they have brought out of poverty.
Let's review the facts, Mr. Speaker. UNICEF came out with a report just this month where they showed that child poverty in Canada has decreased by 22% compared to where they left Canadians.
However, we dug into these claims and found the reality, which tragically is very different from the Liberal lies.
Let's take a look.
At first glance, Canada ranks among the top third of countries for its work in addressing child poverty, but that isn't the whole story. Based on current rates and overall progress in reducing child poverty, the latest UNICEF report card ranks Canada 11th out of 39 of the world's wealthiest countries. Initially, it seems Canada is doing well. Between 2012 and 2021, child poverty fell by 23%. In reality, since 2021, the number of children living in monetary poverty has sharply risen from 15.2% in 2020 to 17.8% in 2021, and more than 1 million Canadian children live in poverty today. This means that 1 in 5 children live in persistent fear and stress, face barriers to having their basic needs met, such as stable housing and nutritious food, and experience a lack of opportunity, including access to quality early childhood experiences. As a child psychologist and health economist, we know that the consequences of child poverty are lifelong and are worth prioritizing.
Between 2012 and 2021, Canada made great strides in addressing child poverty. In 2016, the Canada Child Benefit, or CCB, was introduced as a monthly tax-free supplement for eligible families to support the cost of raising children. Families in low to middle income households benefited the most. The CCB reduced poverty by 11% in single-parent families and 17% in two-parent families. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, program provided additional temporary relief for eligible individuals during the COVID-19 pandemic. And, in recent years, the minimum wage has also increased for Canadians. Although there is evidence that monetary interventions, such as cash transfers, help reduce mental health symptoms among youth experiencing poverty, there remains debate on whether these increases have helped families overcome challenges to the cost of living. Furthermore, the CERB, provided during the pandemic, has now been discontinued, increasing the hardship among Canadian families. Until families are provided with adequate support, the reality is Canada may continue experiencing a rise in rates of child poverty with significant cascading effects. So, this doesn't sound like a good news story at all for the Liberals. Just saying.
Well, and it's not, and they're constantly bragging about how they bring children out of poverty, but this article states otherwise.
And the issue is although this article seems very pro-liberal policy, as in, you should be giving more money to families, it does raise something that is very important when they say that there's evidence that monetary interventions such as cash transfers, aka government handouts, although they help reduce the mental health symptoms, it doesn't solve the problem.
Well, and as we've been saying on this channel for a while, it just kind of masks the symptom. It makes you reliant on the government, and it doesn't get to the root cause.
And you don't have to be religious to appreciate the analogy. Teach a man or give a man a fish, and you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and you'll feed him for a lifetime. If you just think that the solution to this is handing out money, you're not going to solve the problem. You're going to actually exacerbate it because you're going to turn that into a generational problem. Because what's going to happen is those kids are going to grow up in that family that is just getting government handouts, and then they're going to learn that, oh, that's what I need to do. I need to get government handouts.
But not only that, it creates an economic situation where you have taxpayers paying to fund certain groups or families, and they're bearing the burden of the tax hardship, and that's not good for your economy.
And this is in no way intended to, disparage people that are falling on hard times, because everyone in Canada is falling on hard times. The issue here is that there's the root cause of all of this, which is bad policy decisions. You can blame some of it on the previous Conservative government, but we're not there right now. We're on the current Liberal government, and they have dramatically increased the cost of living everywhere. And it's very convenient that Fox and I seem to be running into this issue whenever we look into child poverty or the poverty rate in general. They haven't published the last 2 years of data. So we actually don't know how high it is.
Yeah, so the poverty index is actually 2 years behind, and that's by design. So the most recent data that we have is 2021.
And we're still waiting on that. And you're telling me that with the carbon tax going up, with the cost of food going up, with rent going up, with mortgages going up, you're going to tell me that we're expecting that poverty rate to go down and the child poverty rate to go down? Unfortunately, I don't think so. It's going to be up higher than ever. So this is, this isn't a good news story here. It'll be a good news story when Justin Trudeau gets out of office and we can reduce the cost of living for people and make it easier for them to pay their bills. And then the government equips people with the tools that they need to be self-sufficient and gets out of their house. You don't have great citizens in a country by being completely reliant on the government, which is what this Liberal government wants you to be. So this is just another reason why we need the Liberals to get out of office as soon as possible.
Now, this leads us into the other child program the Liberals love to brag about, $10 a day childcare. Well, that isn't going so well either.
Alberta daycare owner there today telling CTV News why her centre was closed this morning, along with dozens of others in the province, launching rolling closures in protest of the federal provincial $10 a day childcare program. The Association of Alberta Childcare Entrepreneurs says the structure of Canada's national program in their province is putting too much strain on operators. In a statement, the association writes in part, this program in its current state places an unsustainable strain on the childcare industry's ability to serve Alberta families effectively. The closures, the statement goes on to say, symbolize a stand against policies that risk creating divides among children and potentially harming their social and emotional development. In Ontario, the YMCA, which runs about 20% of official childcare spots, is asking the federal government and the province for more cash to run its subsidized programs. The minister who oversees the agreement with the provinces is with me live in studio now. Jenna Sudds is the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Hi, Minister. Good to have you here.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. Have you had any conversations, let's start in Alberta, with your counterpart there about ending what, is a big disruption for parents in the province?
So absolutely. And first of all, I would say my heart goes out to those parents who've had this disruption today and have the stress of having to deal with this.
I'm sorry, is she laughing? If you're going to be a minister, then put on your big boy pants and get used to it, because this is the last thing in Canada that you should be laughing about.
I think from the get-go, our goal in building this nationwide early learning and childcare system is to ensure that parents can rely on this childcare. It's high quality, it's inclusive, accessible, affordable. And, I would say that to date, we've seen remarkable progress, across the country. Every province and territory has already reduced fees by at least 50%. If not to $10 a day. So I think there is a commitment, not only that we've demonstrated by making this $30 billion investment, but also through the provinces and territories, who have also all signed on.
So let me explore a little bit about the mechanics of how that's working. And to disclose to everyone watching, I have a kid in one of these daycares in Ontario. I can only put myself in the shoes of the parents in Alberta today who didn't have care for their kids and know very intimately how big of a deal that would be. There seems to be some, area of gray in between the federal government's idea of how this will work and how the provinces are seeing it work. In essence, what these operators are saying is we're not getting enough money through this to cover our costs because they have escalated, and the money we're getting to make up the difference, let's say with $10 a day or $15 a day, is only equivalent to the fees we charged back in March of 2022. Is that on the province in your view, or is there a role for the federal government to step up here as well?
So this illustrates the problem. You know, the government, when they were trying to introduce this, they were trying to say, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be awesome, yada, 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 yada. And the Conservatives were actually standing up and saying, this is a bad policy. And when it goes bad, and it will, the government is going to turn around and blame this on the provinces.
Tonight, it's been brought up a lot that, you know, why are we here? What are we doing? And I think it's important. These agreements have been signed already by provinces and territories, but there is alarm bells being rung across the country by providers, by parents. Every day we're seeing articles in the media about the concerns about this crisis and that this childcare bill is not meeting the demand. And I guess what I would ask my colleague is, does she understand the importance of, if this is going to be as big as the Liberals say it is and forever and generational, isn't it important to spend as much time on this as possible to make sure we get it right?
And that's exactly what happened. And it's the parents who are paying the price.
Right, because they are now budgeting, okay, so I only have to pay $10 a day for daycare.
But not only that, some of these centers are shutting down. So now parents are left without care at all.
So if you're confused as to why that would be, so the government introduced this program, and the goal of this was to subsidize the daycares, right? Because the daycares have running costs. They have to pay their employees, they have to pay for rent, they have to pay for heating, carbon tax, they have to pay for supplies, they have to pay for meals, you know, all of that stuff. So in order to provide $10 a day daycare, the center has to make some sort of profit, right? So that's where the subsidy is supposed to come in. Well, see, the problem is the federal government didn't provide enough money. And what has been happening is the centers that have signed on to this are like, oh, wait a minute, where's the rest of my money? Now, the issue is they've already committed to $10 a day daycare, so they're charging parents $10 a day, but they are now at a significant loss because they actually don't have enough money from the subsidy to cover their costs. So now they're going out of business. So you have the government announcing this wonderful national $10 a day daycare, and you're literally putting daycares out of business. Now, what does that do, right? So the cascading effect from that is now there's less daycares out there. And the cascading effect from that is now there's not enough spots for kids.
Well, and I don't know how it is in Alberta, but I know just looking at some of the mom groups, you know, that I belong to on Facebook, here in Ontario, you have to sign your child up on a wait list like the second you find out you're pregnant. And then by the time you're ready to go back from your maternity leave almost 2 years later, sometimes you still don't have a spot open.
Yeah. Like I know people I work with, and I'm like, oh, do you get $10 a day daycare? Nope. So this program is not doing as well as they think it is.
Because again, the Liberals just make policy from a podium. They don't actually think through every single thing that needs to go right in order to implement a good program. They talk to the public and they tell the public the things that they want to hear and then half-ass it on the back end.
And now the issue is when the program doesn't work, they point to the provinces and say, well, and if it's not working, it can't be our fault, and it must be the province's fault. So they are quite literally leaving families hung out to dry.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that this has rolled out, rather simplistically, is that each province and territory has an agreement with the federal government. In the case of Alberta, as an example, it's $3.8 billion over 5 years. They have certainty what that looks like. Each year, they know what the payment's going to be, and it increases each of those 5 years. They know, for example, again, using Alberta as an example, the expectation is to create 68,000 new spaces. So when they signed on to these agreements, they knew exactly the dollars that were coming to them and exactly what the expectations and metrics were. So from my vantage point, it's very clear. The provinces have always been funding early learning and childcare. However, they saw the value in moving forward and building this national system as well. We came to terms on an agreement, and we've moved forward.
Do you concede, though, when that agreement was struck, the rate with which the cost of living has increased was not yet in full view? For example, in Ontario, I think the amount it rises each year is about 2.1%. Clearly, inflation has far outpaced that. The daycare operators are saying our costs have escalated at a rate they hadn't previously. Do you concede that that is possible and that the provincial money that was in place, needs to be subsidized by more federal money?
I wouldn't concede that it needs to be subsidized by more federal money.
Why am I not surprised?
She's just blaming everything on the provinces. Oh, well, we laid everything out and it's their fault that they are failing at this.
Yep. And she's basically saying the provinces are the ones that need to bear the blame of this. Can't be us. No. Can't be us, because that would imply that we actually didn't think this through. And that would mean we would actually have to take responsibility of how bad inflation actually got to increase the cost of these daycare workers. But this is the thing. This is liberal fiscal irresponsibility. There is no fiscal responsibility when it comes to this liberal government. It is just irresponsibility. So we're not going to subject you to any more of the of this minister, because it's probably just going to make you angry.
However, there is reason for hope, everybody, and it seems like only the Conservatives are willing to stand up for children. May I present to you Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks to everyone for joining me today. Yesterday, I released a video in which I laid out our government's policy direction on the issues of preserving the choices children have regarding their gender identity until they are mature enough to make them. Policies to better involve parents in their children's education on sensitive issues, and finally, policies addressing the issue of women, girls, and transgender athletes in competitive sports. These are sensitive conversations involving children, and I hope we can depoliticize these issues as much as possible as we work through the process of implementing these policies into law and regulation in a fair and effective way. I want to start by saying that every Albertan who identifies as transgender, I care deeply about your happiness and your well-being. I support you in becoming the person that you want to be or who you already are. And as Premier of this province, I will ensure your rights are always protected. For children who identify as transgender, I want you to also know that these policies are being implemented in order to protect the choices you have regarding altering your physical body until after you've grown mature enough to make such choices safely and with a full understanding of what that means for the rest of your life. These policies include a prohibition on gender reassignment surgeries for minors aged 17 and under. For children aged 15 and under, puberty blockers and hormone therapies for the purpose of gender reassignment will also not be permitted, with the exception of those who've already commenced their treatment at this time. For minors aged 16 and 17 who wish to start hormone therapies for gender reassignment purposes, this will be permitted with parental, physician, and psychologist approval and consent. Alberta's government is also working to attract specialists in gender reassignment surgeries and care to Alberta to assist adults who have a wish to transition, and we plan to build a private registry of these experts to support their lifelong health needs. In our classrooms, we will ensure discussions about gender identity and other sensitive subjects happen at the right time and with the parent-child relationship at its core. This will include a parental opt-in consent requirement when teachers plan to discuss subject matter related to gender identity, sexual orientation, or sexuality for K-12 students. Further, children aged 15 and under will require parental notification and consent before their name or pronouns are changed in school. For minors aged 16 and 17, parental consent won't be required for this, but parents will have to be notified. We will support families with a new pilot program to provide counseling services for families in need to assist with navigating these issues together. In rare circumstances, when transgender children experience an abusive parent, there are, of course, child protection laws that will be enforced. And lastly, We are implementing policies to protect fairness and safety in women's and girls' sports. We will work with sporting organizations to ensure that women and girls have a choice to participate in competitive sport without having to compete against biologically stronger transgender women athletes, while also ensuring that we work with those same organizations to expand co-ed and gender-neutral categories so that every transgender athlete can meaningfully participate in the sports that they love. Gender identity can be a very emotional issue, especially in the context of children. And as we move forward developing and implementing these policies into law, I hope we can depoliticize the issue as much as possible and focus on the well-being of the children involved.
Sounds like common sense to me.
A common sense conservative? You don't say.
You don't say. I do say, and I do say, you know, there was a whole press conference that happened after this. Danielle Smith took questions. It was a half an hour long. I encourage you to watch it because she gets some very direct questions. And in my opinion, you know, she answers them well.
And the link to that is in the description of this video.
But essentially what she says is that, listen, we didn't make this decision on a whim. We didn't make this decision in isolation. Other countries are making these decisions, and she cites Sweden, Finland, Denmark, the UK, and our neighbors to the south are slowly, you know, reversing all of these policies. And why are they doing that? It's because they're seeing what's happening to these kids. And everyone is, for some reason, remembering all over again that, oh, there's a reason that kids didn't used to be able to make significant decisions like getting a tattoo.
Or voting.
Or voting, or drinking, or smoking.
Or driving.
So there's certain things that kids are just too immature and not fully developed yet in order to make those decisions on. It doesn't mean that people that are going through these challenges don't deserve sympathy. They 100% do. And it doesn't mean that they need to be disrespected. What it does mean is that we need to acknowledge that sometimes being a kid sucks, and sometimes being a teenager sucks.
And we need to support our children and teens as much as possible. We can't just rush to medication. We can't just rush to surgery.
So I applaud Danielle Smith for following New Brunswick, for following Saskatchewan, and even going a step further here. And I hope that all of the other provinces eventually fall into line because, yes, this is about protecting our kids, but it's also protecting parents' rights. And we do have rights. They're in the Charter of Rights. You can go and read them. It's protecting their rights as parents. Because as parents, it's our job to protect our kids. And the government needs to protect the parents' rights to do that.